Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 20th, 2024. It has been 3,858 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 181 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 178 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 15 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. Once again, there are a lot of map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain that there is an extreme risk of Russian drone and missile attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure between the 22nd and the 25th of August due to the upcoming Ukrainian Independence Day on the 24th of August. 2. We maintain Russia will restart sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure by October, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. In our assessment, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia has decided to ignore Ukraine's Kursk offensive and commit all available combat power in the Turets, New York and Pokrovsk areas of operation. 4. Despite the new increase in operational tempo, we maintain Russia has no strategic reserve available to mount an effective defense of the Kursk region, continues to suffer unsustainable losses, and has committed almost all of its available conventional forces in Ukraine. 5. Ukrainian forces do not have enough resources to defend Toretsk and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Selidove. 6. We maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing New York and Toretsk in 2024, and we further assess that for Ukrainian forces an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 7. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 8. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 9. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox, despite the ending of Russian government nuclear threats after the Kursk counter-invasion started. 10. We maintain that the policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure and has proven to be ill-conceived. 11. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear power plants. Our analyst, map and writing team did it again and produced a full report. Today I start with the action report summary. Yesterday Russia carried out 158 discrete assaults, and through August the 19th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks rose again to 145. Over 1,000 attacks have been carried out in the last 7 days, returning to the same operational tempo reached in mid-July. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia appear to have committed to their offensive operations in eastern Ukraine at the cost of the Kursk region. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 78 airstrikes, dropping 103 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted approximately 4,600 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. Throughout the day on Monday and into this morning, Russia launched 26 Shahed-136 one-way drones, 2 Iskander-M or North Korean-sourced KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles, and 2 Kh-59 guided air-to-ground missiles at Ukraine. Air defenses shot down 25 Shaheds, 1 ballistic missile, and both Kh-59 guided missiles. An industrial facility in the Ternopil Oblast was hit, causing a major fire. Area residents were advised to close all doors and windows and remain in their homes. Ukrainian officials reported that after 3 hours the fire had been brought under control. Falling debris damaged 4 homes in the Kyiv region and caused a small grass fire. There were no reports of casualties. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. I start in the Glushkovsky area of operation, or AO. It was visually confirmed that the Ukrainian Air Force destroyed the last bridge to the Glushkovsky district at Karysh, cutting off an estimated 2,200 Russian troops in a 603 square kilometer area. On August the 18th, Russian forces established a second wet crossing at the same river between Zvanne and Rzhava. Less than 24 hours later, United States state media agency Radio Liberty shared high-resolution satellite imagery from Planet Labs, showing the bridge was gone and significant fires burning to the east. Video from Ukrainian one-way drones confirmed that the engineered bridge, a military truck and an engineering vehicle had been destroyed. On the subject of videos, almost all of the videos and pictures I reference in today's podcast are available in our situation report. There is more information in the podcast description. Video showed that the Ukrainian Air Force bombed Russian positions in Tyotkina, and Ukrainian forces continued to advance in the adjacent Korenevo AO. At several locations, troops have reached the eastern edge of the Russian salient. By the way, that's the same Ukrainian Air Force that Russia claims it has destroyed 4 times over. In the Korenevo AO, Ukrainian forces were visually confirmed west of Vishnyovka, just east of the 344th kilometer place train station. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, showed significant combat-related fires in the village and on the approaches to Komarovka. The Russian garrison, if one remains, is in a technical encirclement blocked by the Snagast River to the west and Ukrainian forces in Krasnooktyabrsky to the north. There were new claims from Ukrainian sources without evidence that Ukraine captured Troitskaya near the Ukrainian border. We left the status of the settlement unchanged. Here is today's big news. A new geolocated video confirmed our August the 15th sitrap and yesterday's podcast that Ukrainian forces had reached Nikipilovka on the northeastern edge of Korenevo at the Krepna River. But wait, there's more. Russian sources released a video showing a Ukrainian armored column advancing through Korenevo village, confirming our weekend assessment that Russian troops had retreated to the west of the Krepna River in Korenevo. In the video, the column was advancing northwest and 500 meters from the assessed line of conflict and was bombed by the VKS. In the Lgov operational direction, or OD, NASA firms indicated that fighting continued in southern Sheptuhovka and Kauchuk. A video released by Ukraine showed intense fighting in Malaya Loknya at the southeast corner of the former prison. The buildings to the immediate south were on fire as Ukrainian Marder infantry fighting vehicles fired at Russian positions. Data from NASA firms suggest the fighting occurred on August the 14th or the 18th. Based on the new information, we moved the line of conflict back into the settlement and coded it as contested. In the Bolshoe Soldatskoe AO, NASA firms showed extensive combat-related fires on the approaches to and past the farm in western Biryukovka. The satellite data suggested that a force from one of the combatants advanced along a forested gully from or to the R200 highway. Based on our analysis, we moved the settlement into the gray area. NASA firms also showed extensive combat-related fires in Ruska Konopelka, with pro-Ukrainian sources reporting the settlement was under Ukrainian control. The reports come after new claims that Ukraine captured the village of Agronom. We moved Ruska Konopelka to the gray area. In the Sudzha AO, Russian forces attacked the Gazprom Sudzha gas compressor and metering station, causing additional damage to the above-ground infrastructure. On Sunday, Russian sources reported that 42 million cubic meters of natural gas moved through the station on the Druzhba pipeline. In Sudzha, a video showed Ukrainian forces formally raising their national flag over the settlement. Ukrainian forces are now going house to house, looking for Russian stragglers, people who need aid, and abandoned pets. On the 18th of August, Ukrainian soldiers found a paralyzed elderly woman who was abandoned by her caregivers and left in poor condition. They gave her water and promised that medics would come to take her to a hospital. We link to the video, but a word of caution, it is hard to watch. Our analysts geolocated a video of a Ukrainian military truck recovering a disabled infantry mobility vehicle in Rubanshchina, which was hit by a Russian Lancet one-way drone. In a leaked recording of a phone call made by Alexander Garkavenko, the exiled mayor of Goncharovka, it is odd to refer to a Russian mayor as exiled. He claimed that the bodies of 14 Russian soldiers were left behind at a gas station in Cherkasskaya Konopelka, which can't be recovered because the village is under Ukrainian control. There is a gas station just northeast of the village, and based on his report, we adjusted the map to show the region as under Ukrainian control. In the Belaya AO, the latest update from Russian mercenary blogger Rybar showed Ukrainian forces holding Ozerki and advancing south of Kamyshna to the outskirts of Girye. They also reported that Ukrainian forces were no longer in Milaivka and Gaptarovka. Supporting Rybar's claims, those are also words I thought I would never say, NASA firms showed combat-related fires in Spalnaya, Krupets, Kamyshna and Girye. Our team also evaluated Rybar's claims using terrain analysis. The most logical Ukrainian ground line of communication, or GLOC, that's a supply line to Ozerki, is through Kucherov and then Kondratovka. This route provides more concealment versus approaching Ozerki from the north through wide open fields. We also cannot see any viable route to Girye from the south due to the terrain being wide open. We didn't update our map because Rybar is a single point of information. 3 sources or pictures, or it didn't happen. In the Sumy Oblast of Ukraine, Russian forces continued to target civilians and military units. Almost 70 fire missions were carried out, with at least 15 bombs dropped and over a dozen rockets launched by tactical aviation. 4 civilians were wounded. The overnight missile and drone attack I told you about earlier in the podcast targeted an energy facility in Lgov, knocking out power to 18,500 customers in 72 settlements. Journalist and national security expert Marina Yevshan reported on Twitter, also known as X, that she visited military units in the Sumy region. She described Ukrainian morale as high, and although the counter-invasion has not pulled many Russian troops from eastern Ukraine, the number of bombings within Ukraine has decreased. In the border areas, civilians who remained behind said Russian forces were heavily shelling the area before the counter-invasion and that they, quote, fully support further action in Kursk. Here is my theater-wide update for the Russian region. In an interview with the British news agency The Financial Times, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Kyiv did not advise its allies about the counter-invasion. Quote, "Just a few months ago, upon hearing that we were planning such an operation in Kursk Oblast, many representatives of the international community would have said that it was unrealistic and it crossed Russia's main red line." Unquote. In our assessment, Ukraine has already achieved a strategic victory against Russia's hybrid warfare tactics. The counter-invasion has put Russia's war of aggression back in the news in parts of Europe and North America. Last week, a video appeared on Russian channels of a man in military uniform calling for the men in the Kursk region to stay and fight against the Ukrainian invasion. Russian sources researched the man and discovered he's not a military officer. He runs a mortuary service in St. Petersburg. And let me tell you, business is booming. In the same leaked phone conversation with Garkavenko about the status of Cherkasska Konopelka, he described the situation leading up to the Ukrainian counter-invasion and the first days of the offensive. Russian conscripts were given 2 magazines of ammunition each and told to hold out for a day. He also said that despite signs warning areas had been mined, no mines were placed along the border. He accused Russian forces of using civilians as human shields. Quote, "In populated areas, the Russian military worked with grads. They deployed the grad right in the middle of the street and worked, you know, and I saw it personally." Unquote. The Crimean Tatar insurgent group Atesh reported that the Russian 1st Motor Rifle Battalion, 810th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade, has suffered heavy losses since August the 6th, including the capture of the commander of the 3rd Company. On August the 17th, the Ukrainian 225th Separate Assault Battalion released a video showing the disorganized retreat of 3rd Company from their defensive positions. Let me do my Russian propagandist imitation, just this once. A new video showed the elite shock forces of the 810th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade boldly advancing toward Moscow. After 2 weeks of offensive operations, no one within the senior echelon of the Russian government has issued a new nuclear threat, and autocrat Vladimir Putin was conducting a state visit in Azerbaijan. Because, you know, everything is going to plan.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Liptsy-Vovchansk-Yo, fighting continued in Vovchansk and the area of Gluboke, with no change to the situation. Russia targeted electrical infrastructure in Kozacha Lopань, knocking out power to 1,000 customers near the Russian border. Further south, in the Kupiansk-Yo, Russian attacks north of Sinkivka were repulsed, while Russian units tried to build upon their recent gains near Pishchane, attacking in the direction of Kolesnikivka and Glushkovsky. In the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces expanded their assaults, attacking in the directions of Stelmachivka, Andriivka, Novosergiivka, and Novoyegorivka. None of the attacks were successful. West of Novoselivsk, a video showed Russian troops attempting to advance through open fields. Ukrainian biolab mosquitoes, better known as one-way drones, solved the problem. West of Kremenna, Russian forces continued their attacks, trying to advance on Makiyivka, Grekivka, Nevske, Novosadove and Torske without success. Now, let's talk about the Donbas, where the situation is very difficult for Ukrainian forces. We'll start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siverskoe, Russian troops continued their operational pause, carrying out smaller attacks in the areas of Verkhnyokamyenske, Spirne and Ivanodaryevka. In the Kostiantynivka, Russian forces carried out 7 assaults on the western edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar, the forested region west of Ivanivske, and in the area of Andriivka. Russian forces made new tactical gains in the Toretsk-New York AO, where the situation continued to deteriorate. Ukrainian forces appeared to cling to the industrial district and northeastern New York despite significant Russian attacks in the direction of Nelipivka. Ukrainian drones attacked Russian troops in northwestern Pivnichne, confirming an 800-meter advance to the eastern border of Toretsk. Further south, intense fighting between Russian-occupied Zalizne and Toretsk continued. 4 Ukrainian civilians who refused to evacuate were killed over the last 24 hours. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued to make tactically significant gains in the Pokrovsk AO. The situation has become really critical. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Vozdvizhenka and Myrolubivka were repulsed. That's about the best news available in the AO. Russian forces made additional advances into southeastern Hrodivka, where volunteers and the White Angels were desperately trying to convince civilians to evacuate. In Novohrodivka, a video showed that Russian artillery and airstrikes were destroying the settlement. Russian forces raised flags in Novozhelanne and Zavitne, and due to the risk of encirclement, Ukrainian forces withdrew from Mezhove and Skuchne to the west of the Vovcha River. We moved Komishivka into the grey area and believe Ukrainian forces have withdrawn. Fighting has moved south into Ptycha. A Ukrainian artillery brigade commander told the British news publication The Financial Times that they were forced to ration ammunition again, and it is a major reason why Russian forces have started to advance rapidly. Quick assessment. Does our analyst team believe Ukraine has a large plan? Yes. Are they ready to share it? No. There is something very curious about Ukraine's withdrawal that the team has noticed. That's all they could share with me. Russian forces are 11 kilometers from Pokrovsk and 5 kilometers from Selidove. Ukrainian officials ordered a mandatory evacuation of all civilians from the Pokrovsk district, where up to 53,000 people, including 4,000 children, remain. The mayor of Pokrovsk, Serhiy Dobryak, said that area residents had no more than 2 weeks to leave. Please leave now. I know what you feel. I know you have your reasons. But please, if you can, reconsider. I am twice refugee myself, and I had to reconsider twice. We need to be alive to see our victory. Наша рідна Донеччина повернеться додому. Все буде Україна. In the Kurakhove, Ukrainian troops continue to hold Nevelske. I know Wargonzo promised. He promised the third claim in 6 months was for real this time. This is why we have trust issues. Russian forces have been unsuccessful in their attempts to drive Ukrainian forces from the Lozova River area in Krasnogorivka despite continued attacks. Southeast of Kostiantynivka, fighting continued. Finally, in the Vuhledar AO, fighting was reported east of the T-532 highway near Vodyane and in the direction of Vuhledar from occupied Volodymyrivka. A quick visit to the rest of the Russian front for an important update. In the Rostov region, video showed that the strategic diesel fuel storage facility in Proletarsk was still burning out of control for the third day. The massive, uncontrolled explosions I told you about yesterday wounded 41 of the 250 firefighters on the scene, with 18 in hospital and 5 in critical condition. Shortly after the blast, a video showed firefighters watching in stunned horror. Quote, "Let's get the f*** out of here, let's go. I think it reached the gasoline. The guys are going to burn." Unquote. After the explosion, Russian officials ended firefighting efforts as the flames spread to cover 10,000 square meters and the smoke visible from space. 22 of the 76 storage tanks holding diesel fuel have already been destroyed, with each one holding 5,000 metric tons of fuel. NASA firms showed new heat signatures within the last 3 hours, indicating the fire is spreading through the facility. Here is my Theaterwide update. Strapped for money and time, Ukrainian engineers have come up with a novel solution to create anti-tank obstacles quickly. Concrete railroad ties are being buried in the ground as a substitute for unsecured dragon teeth and then cemented in place. The extra dirt is then used to reinforce the obstacle further. We link to some pictures, and it appears to be an effective solution. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, will visit Kyiv on Friday, making his first state visit since Russia expanded its war aggression. US news agency Bloomberg reports that Modi will bring a message from autocrat Putin, and negotiations about the production of aircraft and aircraft engines between Ukraine and India will take place. Denmark reiterated their position that Copenhagen is not against Ukraine striking military targets within the 1991 borders of Russia using any of the weapons provided, including the F-16. However, the White House has the final say. Ukraine has conducted a 15-day special military operation search for Moscow's red lines and still hasn't found them. Going against earlier reports, Germany confirmed the delivery of a short-range version of the Iris-T air defense system to Ukraine and a new military aid package. The details are in today's situation report, link in the podcast description. Finally, a quick stop in the land of Mobix, mobilization and the Mir. Autocrat Putin signed a decree that will grant temporary residence permits to any person on the grounds of, quote, non-acceptance of the policies implemented by these states that impose destructive neoliberal ideological guidelines that contradict traditional Russian spiritual and moral values, provided for by the fundamentals of state policy for the preservation and strengthening of traditional Russian spiritual and moral values. Unquote. Appearing to target North Americans and Europeans who love word salad, immigration quotas, language proficiency, knowledge of Russian history, and proof of having needed job skills are not required. Approved applicants would be given a temporary residency permit and can take a path to citizenship if they renounce their Western connections. Since 2023, as part of the naturalization process, military-aged men have been handed summonses to the commissariat with their new Russian passports. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.